Colorado Springs' #1 car show by default. This is Automotive ADHD.
And welcome to the bonus edition of the Automotive ADHD show. Now, you know, if you listen to this interview on the radio, my guest is Ethan Hunter, a racing lunatic. His words, not mine, though I think they are fitting. And we want to do a bonus edition of the show here. And every now and then we do this on the show. You catch the radio show, but this is an exclusive for podcast listeners. So that means you. If you're listening to this here on the podcast, you can also catch it on YouTube. Now, Ethan, we were talking about here after the show, tires. And I got to credit you for this idea, but why are tires so important when you're racing?
Well, that's what separates the car from the ground.
Yeah.
You know, that is the in-between, right? Mm-hmm. And when that isn't right, it doesn't matter how good the car is. It doesn't matter what temperature the track is. You know, if the tires aren't right, the car ain't right.
Right.
You know, so, you know, we used to go out and do testing on old tires, and we used to try to get a car to work on old tires just to save money. But we found out that, you know, you need to be testing on brand new tires. And the reason is because the tires come in and then they go out, you know, just like anything else. And
right, it's a consumable item.
It is. Yeah. It is. And you got a window of where they're actually usable and tunable, right? Mm-hmm. Because once they fall off, they've fallen off. You know, there's no reason to try to keep tuning the car around something that's already gone.
Right. Especially if you're setting up your suspension with that, and if you're using clapped out tires and trying to dial your suspension in, and then you're counterproductive at that point.
Yeah,
you're trying to tune around another issue.
Right. Yeah. And vice versa. Some people will have kind of an okay setup, but they'll just put new tires on it every time, and it's just a Band-Aid, you know, because you can put new tires on things and you feel like you're driving so good, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can go so deep into these corners, but yeah, and you know, 4 or 5 laps, then it's gone again. So having that tire technology and that tire knowledge literally separates the front of the pack to the back of the pack. Tires are one of the most important things. Once you have a decent shock package, you have a decent power or power plant, you know, the tires is where you focus on next. When we were talking about brakes, you know, people want to stop sooner. You want to stop sooner. Well, you need better tires, you know, because the brakes will lock up. And, you know, once they've locked up, they've done their job. Now it's up to the tire to do their job and actually stop the car, right? And in an Evo, being that it's real heavy, you know, all the weight's up front, it's almost a 70-30 car. You feel the brake fade very fast on an Evo like that. And we're on huge tires that have no slip at all because we're unregulated, you know. So we're running a 100 tread wear, super big Yokohama slick, you know, 285s all the way around. So
wow. You said 100 tread wear.
100 tread wear, yeah.
100 tread wear.
Yep.
Real quick, break that down for listeners who might not be up to speed on that. Like, for example, my S2000 sitting there behind you is on 200 tread wear tires, right? Which is a good standard, kind of like an autocross thing.
Very popular tire.
Street tire, you know.
Yep.
Performance street tire, but break that down real quick.
Yeah, so a 200 tread wear, just like you were saying, that's going to be like your high performance tire. You know, that's going to be your R888s or something relative to that, you know, your Hancooks, stuff like that. And then you get down to what I like to call marshmallows. You know, where you just stick your thumb fingernail into it and it just sinks right in. You know, and that's a really, really soft tire compound, you know, a 100 tread wear. And with the softer compounds, they do heat up faster, right? So you do want to find that window of, you know, how soft is too soft? Well, how many laps am I going to run? You know, how heavy is my car? How hard am I on the brakes? You know, how many right turns are there compared to left turns? You know, all of that is a variable on what tire to pick. And if you're allowed to, you know, like in the Miatas, we're all on the same exact tire.
Right, you have to be. That's the whole point of spec Miata. So you're all in the same car.
Now you guys got people, you know, shaving tires down to add a little bit more camber on these tires because you're at a max camber for suspension, but you can still shave down the inside of a tire and gain a little bit of camber.
So see, that's one of those things of get creative with the rules, right?
You got to get creative. You know, you got to bend the rules and you got to be on the cutting edge of cheating. You know, and if you're not, you're gonna get beat.
Yeah.
So you know, it's a very creative sport. You know, the races aren't always won on Saturdays. You know, a lot of times the races are won Monday through Thursday, doing the prep and getting your tires right and getting the stagger right on the circle track cars. You know, because we can't run a staggered setup on a road course car because then you'd turn right very terribly. You know, it would be miserable. So on those cars, we're really working with alignment and making the tire contact the track throughout the entire corner, right?
Okay.
You know, we want to use the whole tire, right? And when that car gets over on the right or the left side and it transfers the weight, you want that to be at the right camber and caster settings to where when you're turning, you're using that full contact patch on the loaded tire. And to find that, you're using heat. And when I say that is when you come off the track, immediately when you come off the track, your tire guy needs to be there with the infrared tire gun to measure the inside to middle to outside temperature difference, because you know, a tire can be, you know, a temperature, but also there's an inside temperature, a middle temperature, an outside temperature. And if the outside's just cold, you know, that means you ain't even using it. You know, you're turning into the corner and the outside of the tire is not even touching the ground.
Right. And that can be reflective on tire pressure too, obviously, as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep. So, you know, your tire pressure's too high, the same thing, and you need to lower it, or, you know, take some camber out of it, or add some in, you know, whatever the case is. But the tire is what tells you what the car's doing. The driver can think they know what they're doing out there, but they got a million other things going on. The tire really tells you what kind of alignment the car really needs, or if it's on point, you know, that kind of thing. The driver can get you close, but the tire doesn't lie.
Right.
So that's where a lot of people forget that, you know, tires are important, and they are expensive. You know, they're a lot more expensive than putting a set of brakes on, and sometimes you got to do it every weekend. But if you don't do that, you'll always be out of your tuning window. You'll never be in dialed.
Right. Well, and you know, we talked about earlier too, a little bit, maybe before the show, but, you know, talking about cars that have a cost to run, right? Your expenses, your consumables, your brakes, your tires, things like that. A lot of people want to focus all on power on the car, especially people who are maybe new to motorsports. Like, okay, I want to go fast. I need more power. And they, you know, buy a car that's got really big wide tires, and they're maybe not ready, monetarily speaking, to replace those tires if they want to be competitive, you know, every race.
Right.
Or even some people, you know, depending on the racing, you're replacing tires mid-race.
Right.
You know, right? That's a big expense. So like Spec Miata, for example, small tires, they're cheap comparatively. Even a good performance tire is cheap compared to if you're trying to run tires on something bigger, like a, you know, like a Corvette or something, for example.
Yeah, the vet guys, they're spending anywhere from, you know, $1,700 to $3,000 a weekend on, you know, full size slicks for their cars. And then the Miata guys, we're spending about $900. The cool thing about the Miata guys is we do have a contingency. So if you do win that race, there's 4 races per weekend. If you win any of those races, you get 1 tire per race that you've won. So if you do have a clean sweep and you sweep the weekend, then you get 4 free tires.
That's cool. I like that.
Just for running the stickers, right? So it is cool. It is cool on that side of things, especially when you get a couple freebies here and there. But yeah, the Porsche guys and the Corvette guys, you know, they're spending boatloads of money on tire.
Absolutely. And so with tire being really important, you know, when people ask me, they're like, hey, well, what should I do for my first modification? Brakes and tires.
Brakes and tires.
Brakes and tires every single time. You're going to get more performance, more dollar out of your car with brakes and tires, and arguably tires then brakes.
Right.
You know, because we were talking about that too, where you can get to a point where your brakes lock up so quick that it doesn't matter. If your tire can't actually slow the car down, you know, racing and performance driving is all about balancing that traction. You know, I've had people explain it before where, you know, your grip, you know, as like, say you assign a number to it. Say you got 100 grip points. Well, if you're starting to brake, you're taking grip points away for braking. If you're accelerating, if you're turning, that all reduces that, you know, 100 grip points, if you think of it that way.
Right.
And so you were telling me a funny story about how you might have ended up in the back of a van once because of 2 big brakes and not enough tire. Tell me about that.
Yeah, when I was younger, you know, that's where you learn, right? You learn, you know, the hard way. And I put the CTSV calipers on the front of my RB25 240SX. And I learned that brake bias is very important because I go to catch a yellow light that I thought the van was going to go through as well, you know, kind of speed through it, but he decided to slam his brakes last minute, and so did I. And, you know, my front brakes, they locked up, no problem. But my tires, I was running some Federal 595s, and those are more of like a cool looking tire more than a decent tire. You know, they're not a very good tire. So that just slid on ice, and I ended up right in the back of an electrician's van, and he came out and looked at his huge steel bumper and was like, I don't see nothing. And I'm looking at my messed up intercooler and JDM Zenke stuff and all this stuff. I'm like, dang. So yeah, I definitely learned that day that, you know, just because you got big, cool brakes doesn't mean that the car is actually going to stop fast. You know?
Right.
And so, yeah, like I said, having that, the missing ingredient's always usually what's separating the vehicle from the track, and that's just the right tire setup.
Absolutely. That can make or break a car. Again, my guest is Ethan Hunter. He's been racing since he was real young, and he's still racing right now. And I think that is, hearing it from someone who's doing it, who just says tires. That's what you need. And that is really important. So, hey, Ethan, thanks again for joining me here on the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. Glad to have you. And you have been tuned into a bonus edition of the Automotive ADHD show. Remember to catch the show as well on the radio. If this is your first time seeing the show, this is a radio show too. You can stream it and hear it on the air and all of these fine places. AM 1460 The Answer, AM 1400 KRLN, and 91.7 KLZR. I'll see you on the radio show.